Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Now, you might think of today's morning briefing as being some sort of early entry for the Friday crime report, but actually it's something I want to sound off on, and I've been meaning to get around to this for the last week or so. As most of you are aware, late last month there was a report out of Los Angeles about two Jewish men who had been shot. Each victim was shot outside of a different synagogue. Interestingly enough, the LAPD, showing how brilliant they are, initially said that there was no evidence to confirm that the shootings were motivated by hate. What that means is they didn't have a black suspect. But as the information continued to pile up, they eventually had to change their tune. Now, the police didn't catch the shooter until after they reviewed license plate reader records that placed the shooter's car in the area at the time that the shootings occurred. Kind of reminds you of Jussie Smollett, doesn't it? There's all kind of technology that the police has got in these cities to read license plates and be able to track vehicles. Think about that the next time you hear about some mysterious shooting that took place in a black enclave, like some drive-by or another at a park, and the cops say, "Oh, we just can't figure out who did it." Now, when the shooter in this case was caught, he was identified as 28-year-old Jamie Tran. He had been homeless for a year and living out of his car. Tran carried out both of the shootings, specifically targeting Jewish people in Los Angeles. I'm sure that comes as a shock to the LAPD. The new mayor of LA, Karen Bass, gave her sincere condolences to the victims and to the Jewish community in LA as a whole, saying that anti-Semitism is intolerable. She also made sure to mention that she celebrated the first day of Hanukkah with Jewish Los Angelinos just a few blocks from where these shootings occurred. The numerous statements that she released showing solidarity with the Jewish community is good. And it's also far more than she's ever said about the repeated attacks against black Los Angelinos who face violent attacks on a daily basis from not just private citizens, but also from public employees like the police. Now, compare Mayor Bass's response to this incident, where two people were shot, though fortunately not killed, to the way that Nikki Haley reacted after the Mother Emanuel Church massacre, where 9 black parishioners were murdered in their own church, including the pastor. Then Governor Nikki Haley refused to say anything at first, and it took a public outcry to finally force her to say something. She wanted to make a show out of how she could care less that 9 black people had been killed by some white supremacist punk. She is a racist through and through, and now she's trying to get some half-brained presidential run underway. Black mayors bend over backwards to show that they care about everyone in their city. Nikki Haley, who is of East Indian descent, she went out of her way to show how much contempt she has for black people. Now, Jamie Tran has since been indicted for multiple hate crimes charges at the federal level. And I find it interesting that the feds were able to determine that it was a hate crime so quickly, because in cases where black people are assaulted or even murdered, the feds always seem to need several weeks, if not months, to determine if they think that it qualifies as a hate crime, and most of the time they tell us they don't think that it does, and on the rare occasions that they do, they try to hurry up and rush some quickie plea deal through the courts, one that doesn't include a hate crime charge. But that's not how they're handling this one, because the victims aren't black, and the perpetrator isn't black either. The laws in this country are color-coded, as is the white media coverage, or in this case, cover-up. Well, let me tell you just a few details about this case that the white media won't. Jamie Tran had been enrolled at UCLA. He was studying dentistry. In 2018, he was kicked out of UCLA's dental school. For what, I don't know. But he was only just getting started with his misbehavior. July 3rd, 2022, he was spotted on a bench near the engineering building at Cal State Long Beach campus. He told the police he was carrying a loaded weapon for protection. Amazingly, the police actually arrested him, unharmed of course, and charged him with felony possession of a loaded firearm on a school campus. But he wasn't through annoying his former classmates just yet. Between August and December of 2022, he repeatedly sent antisemitic texts and emails to a number of his former classmates. There was one in particular that he seemed to want to single out for special abuse. This guy got himself kicked out of dental school just 4 years earlier, and yet he's still obsessing about his former classmates. Oh, and as for the gun charge, after he was arrested, he was released on bail. Now, he was supposed to be back in court late last month, but of course we all know he carried out his rampage before that could happen. But there's one more aspect of all this that needs to be mentioned. The FBI already knew about this guy. He wasn't just known to the LAPD, he was known to the feds too. The LAPD had received what's called a guardian lead from the FBI due to the hate-filled emails that Jamie Tran was sending all over the place. Now, what the LAPD was referring to is the FBI's Guardian Threat Tracking System, which documents potential terrorist threats and suspicious incidents and then assigns them to be followed up on, and they also issue alerts about potential threats as well. The white media reports that there were at least 2 Guardian reports generated on Jamie Tran before he went on his rampage. But nothing was ever done about it. Brian Levin, director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at Cal State San Bernardino, asked, how is it possible that the feds knew about this guy and yet did nothing? How is it possible that this guy had a criminal trial pending for a gun charge and for making anti-Semitic threats, and yet he was still allowed to get a gun regardless? The FBI tried to explain away their inaction by claiming that the Guardian reports are of limited use because they often document actions that aren't criminal in and of themselves. Oh, so this is just a case of trans actions not being deemed criminal? So having a gun charge isn't a crime anymore. Nice to know. All this white-splaining from the feds sounds real familiar to me. A racist gunman who has charges pending, the FBI knows about him, and yet they do absolutely nothing to stop him from getting a gun? I'm trying to remember, where do I recall hearing about a case just like this one? Because I know I heard of a case like that before. Oh yes, Dylan Roof. Before he committed the Mother Emanuel Church massacre, Dylan Roof had been arrested for and admitted to drug possession, which should have disqualified him from being able to make a gun purchase. But he's got genetic immunity from the law, and as we all know, those gun laws, just like the drug laws, were written to catch black people. So despite having a drug rap, the FBI's so-called examiners, who are supposed to be doing the background checks on people, they made no effort to contact law enforcement regarding Dylan Roof's arrest. And of course, even without a background check, the gun dealer still sold him a firearm anyway. So Jamie Tran wasn't the first criminal who the FBI did nothing to stop from obtaining a firearm, despite having all the information necessary to stop him, despite the fact that it was against the law for him to even be trying to get a gun. For some reason, when they're not chasing black people, the feds just can't seem to get anything done. These spree killers and even mass murderers just seem to keep slipping the net. But the net seems more like a revolving door. And when you see something happen this consistently for this long, it's time to stop asking what's going wrong and to instead accept the fact that this is the system working exactly the way it was designed. All last year, this guy was giving all kinds of signs that he was getting ready to carry out some sort of mass shooting. Stalking former classmates, sending all kinds of threats, staking out a school, gun in hand. But they let him out on bail because of course they did. And even when afterwards he began harassing and threatening Jewish classmates, nothing was done about it, because he didn't fit the profile of who they really want to go after. This incident is yet another in an endless string of examples that proves why the lie of black anti-Semitism is so dangerous. Because it gives the actual violent anti-Semites a free pass to target whomever they want and to harm people with near impunity. You have websites like the Daily Kos trying to blame this on Kanye West of all people. There's absolutely no evidence that this Tran character was influenced by or even listens to Kanye West, but this is how desperate the white media is to prop up the dead horse of black anti-Semitism. Kanye West hasn't harmed anyone in the Jewish community or anywhere else, and he's not going to. And there's no black people harming the Jewish community in his name either. Goldie Taylor told us all that the real threat was young black men, who apparently are mindless robots who will do anything Kanye says no matter how ridiculous, right? Only that's not true. There are anti-Semitic attacks taking place, but it's not Kanye nor young black men who are carrying them out. So will Goldie Taylor issue an apology? Of course not, because this isn't about being right. It's about keeping up the steady drumbeat of anti-black propaganda. So, as we see, the phony narrative that Kanye West is encouraging anti-Semitism is dead on arrival. But since they can't show where Kanye or young black men are harming anyone, they instead look for any act of anti-Semitic violence committed by anyone else. And then they mention Kanye West's name, even though he had absolutely nothing to do with it. And that's deliberate. They're using Kanye West as a proxy for the black community as a whole. This is a typical propaganda tactic of the white media. It's called creating a false association. You do it by taking two completely unrelated things and then mention them together in the same sentence over and over and over again. Like George Bush did with 9/11 and Saddam Hussein. Saddam, 9/11, Iraq, Al-Qaeda, 9/11, Saddam, 9/11, Iraq. You do that enough times and eventually a lot of people are going to start to think that those two unrelated things have something to do with one another, even though the person making the false association knows that they don't. That's what's going on here. There's been this persistent lie put out by the likes of Ari Emanuel, Juju Chang, and the rest of the white media that the black community is the core of anti-Semitism and any other hate crime in the United States. On the one hand, you have the white media distracting everyone with lies saying to look at black people. And on the other hand, the police and other law enforcement get the clear message that so long as the person being accused of a hate crime isn't black, then the white media is not going to cover it, so it doesn't matter. This white media narrative has played itself out so many times, so aggressively, that of course when they see a surly young man with a pistol on a college campus, rather than lock him up and hold him until trial, instead they just let him out on bail. And be it Dylan Roof or Jamie Tran, the FBI will consistently miss all the clues and won't send out any alerts to arrest anyone. But Ari Emanuel bears more than a little blame for things like this. His anti-black propaganda has real consequences and puts people in danger, not just black people who become targets for white media smear campaigns and for false accusations, but also the Jewish community who is left totally vulnerable to actual anti-Semitic violence. Ari Emanuel has been totally quiet about this incident. He claims to care so much about the safety of the Jewish community, but in the face of actual violence, not the rantings of a bipolar rapper, Ari Emanuel is still silent. All he can think about is himself and protecting his image, especially from any uncomfortable questions about how he smeared the black community or about why he hasn't done anything about his friend Dana White after he was caught on video beating his wife in public. Yeah, there was a reason why this one faded from the headlines real quick. The black mayor of LA has voiced and shown more concern and solidarity with the Jewish community in the wake of this incident than Ari Emanuel has. Yet, whenever he slithers out of whatever hole he's hiding in, you can bet that he'll go back to being the main one continuing to push the lie that black people just aren't doing enough to combat anti-Semitism, which is doubly insulting when you consider that Ari Emanuel isn't doing anything at all. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Mouse, Stephen Roden, Richard Allen Lovell, Starlet Thompson, and Christopher Ellis. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.